Good afternoon, Paul and Bhargav. It's the 25th of August, 2023. So today there's a rather interesting development we have to discuss regarding the police in Indonesia. Earlier this month, the Supreme Court commuted the death sentence of Ferdy Sambo to life imprisonment. Now, Ferdy Sambo was a two-star general and the head of the police's internal affairs department, who was arrested for the murder of his aide-de-camp last year in Jakarta. The controversy escalated, especially as there was a massive cover-up. There was revealed to be a massive cover-up involving over 100 police officers and senior police officials in the incident. This set off a lot of public outcry, and he was given the death sentence. Now the Supreme Court has come back and given him a life sentence, and this has caused a lot of controversy among the public in Indonesia, whose trust in the police has been diminishing given the multiple cases and tragedies last year.
Yeah, look, I do, mate. The commuting of the sentence was horribly predictable. So you've had a man with several accomplices, including his wife, and up to 100 police officials have been implicated in covering up the murder. You've had the prosecution not be able to determine the true motive behind the killing. The police have also not made efforts to address accusations that Ferdy Sambo was leading a racketeering network within the police force. And the prosecution can't act fairly for the same reason the Supreme Court's overruled the case, and that is everyone fears reprisals by uncovering the murky world that is something that's called the Indonesian police force. And of course, there are good members of the police force. There is a fairly decent system somewhere within it, but it has been inundated and overtaken in a statute law system of Indonesia that places so much power in the police that they then use that power to rort, extort, in this case, commit murder and get away with it. After Sambo's arrest, multiple high-ranking police officials were quickly reshuffled and dismissed. Investigations into the police force were launched, and not surprisingly, no actionable information against Sambo was gathered from the investigations. Now, he's the head honcho in a massive crime racket, which does very little to maintain any display of appropriate levels of security, because they don't need to, because they're above the law. The police force has since then been accused of trying to cover up the incident due to Sambo's connections with the force. I mean, that's a no-brainer. That's your motive. It's right there. The fact that it can't be proven is because the police system is a lot better at extorting and creating cases from which they benefit financially than it is at actually assisting the due process of law. Just to add one other point there, I mean, we're seeing the pushing down from Europe and America of the ESG system, you know, the environmental, social and government principles. They're very much a hot topic in Indonesia today as well. You know, the West has tried to establish carrot approaches, and now they've reverted to a stick approach. So the old processes of offering energy initiatives and sustainable forestry initiatives have kind of failed. Now they're going to close off the markets, if not just Indonesia, but particularly Indonesia doesn't change the way it looks at labour laws and sustainability in terms of environmental protection, i.e. stop cutting down forests, stop doing deals with the Chinese that mean that they're able to produce stuff at a lower cost. Bhargav, perhaps we need to do a separate session on the ESG too.
Yes, Paul, most certainly. ESG is a very interesting issue. We can extrapolate some of its components more in detail in a separate audio.
Yeah, so look, why don't we look to see if Dan can join us on that one? I think that'll be really interesting. Uday, thanks for your thoughts on that, and thanks for the background. To me, all things bad are always predictable in Indonesia. The fact that you can't really do any business involving any government work, which means everything, because they ultimately regulate everything, without having to play the game of corruption. The fact that you then have all the do-good Western multinational companies pretending they're not involved in it, as opposed to they're just doing creative paperwork to cover it up. It's a real concern to Indonesia. And like everything in these developing countries, it's all about people in the central positions wanting to enrich themselves rather than be focused on what's good for their nation and the people of their nation. It's frankly quite sickening. But it is what it is, Uday, and thanks for drawing it to my attention. I had heard, but commuting his sentence, it really does highlight that the Indonesian legal system continues to be a farcical joke that protects the wealthy.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. And I'd just like to stress that this is the tip of the iceberg, especially in terms of the professionalization of the security forces in Indonesia. For example, the head of the National Police's Criminal Investigation Agency was involved in allegations over taking kickbacks of illegal mining in Kalimantan last year. And this happened also after the Kanjuruhan Malang Stadium tragedy, in which police tear gassed and killed over 130 people in a football stadium. So it's just the tip of the iceberg, and there is a lot of underpinnings to this and political players at the back of this.
Yeah, look, I mean, the security forces, and since the fall of Suharto and the police were separated from reporting under the military's, you know, it's still way from perfect, but it's come a long way in the last, 25 odd years. The police, however, when they went out to be a civil entity, which they pushed for, not being subordinate to the military, they have deteriorated massively. Corruption without Suharto, and including, despite what the Western media portrays, and those that don't think critically or deeply think, corruption's continued to deteriorate, as has on the International Corruption Watch List Indonesia's position. And that is because under Suharto it was controlled and central. Now everybody thinks that they have the right of Suharto. I mean, the law enforcement agency has a history of lacking accountability and proper checks and balances. The Sambo's case continues to prove and clearly show the disparity between powerful government officials and the public. It's really sad for this country because democracy promised so much, but as a part of that process, the police were able to use the excuse that it shouldn't be supported in the military to become a heinous, corrupt element that abuses power, commits murders, runs crime gangs, and at some point that's going to have to be cleaned up. But make no bones about it, Indonesia corruption is endemic. It's in nearly every walk of life. And I think the ESG, again, may prove to be a lot more complex to enforce than it is to conjure up in the palaces of Europe and America. I mean, what they haven't considered is the whole oligopoly's ability to be more agile than these regulations or these compliant environments that get set up abroad. So it'll be an interesting discussion. I look forward to that one.
Thanks
Uday,
a lot for your inputs, Paul.
Uday, what would be interesting, mate, is to maybe just get our team to troll the database and just come up with how many arrests have actually been made against police and governors and government officials by the Anti-Corruption Commission, and then just highlight how the Anti-Corruption Commission itself has been changed from ongoing persecution, and then how it's gone down the path of sometimes it's easier to join them to try and beat them, and also how many or what are the average sentences that are being handed out for these massive corruption cases? Are they really just for show? So maybe pop that on the agenda for a report to be issued at the end of September if we could.
Yeah, sure, we'll do, Paul. I'll get the team on that.
All right, mate, and look, good luck with your removals. Keep in touch the best you can, and it was great hosting you in Wahin and Indonesia, and I look forward to hearing about life in Goa for our surfing head of ops.
Definitely, Paul. It was a pleasure. Thanks a lot for your inputs today, and I'll see you on another call soon.
See you, mate. Thanks. Thanks, Bhargav.